But that dream has been true in the world since Buddha and before Buddha. The idea of people living together in peace and harmony, we see in Confucius, Lao Tse, and so many others all through history. The effort's been there. It's been a quiet voice, sometimes drowned out by war. In our own lifetimes, we've seen places occupied in various ways. The veterans of World War I occupied Anacostia in Washington, D.C., some 20,000 strong, because they had not received their bonus after World War I. And as you know, General MacArthur drove them off of Washington with CS gas. CS gas is quite a bit stronger than ordinary tear gas. It would be illegal in war, but it's okay to use domestically because doesn't apply. So that's one Occupy that we remember. Another Occupy I recall so well. I was only 4 when the bonus march took place, but I do remember the one in '68, which was the Poor People's March. After Dr. King was assassinated, the determination to continue the Poor People's March was carried out in spite of his passing on April 4th of 1968. And we occupied Washington, calling it Resurrection City. The group there lasted for about 2 weeks or better and was driven off, oddly enough, with the same gas, CS gas, that they drove the bonus marches out with. That's an interesting historical thing, isn't it? And so what we have is an increase in consciousness. And I would say almost every religion in the world has had its message, peace on earth, goodwill to everybody. And the sad thing that led me to write my book was the misuse of religion, using religion as a cloak for malice. And that, of course, has been done. And as you read the good book, you will see time and time again to watch out for the phonies, the frauds, the charlatans, the liars, the hypocrites. You know, you think of the gentle Jesus, he couldn't stand hypocrisy. He said, prostitutes and tax collectors are entering the kingdom before you are. Who was he talking to? The religious leaders of his day. It wasn't that he didn't love Judaism. He was a Jew, he lived as a Jew, and he died as a Jew. He had nothing against Judaism. He had a lot against hypocrisy. He had a lot against the misuse of religion as a cloak for malice. And I'd like to say that today, 2012, this is one of our major problems. And I tried to identify it in my book, and you'll see this particular religion in American exceptionalism. How could any of us live here since the end of World War II and in the period after World War II observe our country massacre more than 10 million people? How could we do that if it wasn't our religion? That religion was identified as manifest destiny. That religion was identified by the Puritans. They had to kill these terrible people. Read your Declaration of Independence. They blamed the king for the indigenous savages in this country, and they killed them. So we've had a problem of exceptionalism for some time, haven't we? Our founders knew all about it. They were very worried about it. They knew that patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. They knew that well. Washington was worried about it. Franklin was terribly worried about it. He said, we never had a good war. We've never had a bad peace. Jefferson and Madison were terribly concerned. They didn't want the witch burners to claim that this was their country, and they insisted that it not be. There shall be no law regarding an establishment of religion, period. Because they knew the dangers. They knew the history of religious states. Didn't make any difference what religion. Religious states have been failures in every case. So the problem is in our culture what's called exceptionalism. Today we hear the president let us know that he can kill anyone in the world anywhere he wants. He can kill suspects. There's suspected people up there that are really 12-year-old children, but we'll kill them too. And now, are you surprised that the people in Iran are thinking that he might have killed their nuclear scientists? He has to prove that he didn't. Why? Because he said he could. So, these are the problems we have. So the number one religious problem is American exceptionalism, which is our religion. Now we put that under the cloak, frequently, of Christianity. And this is a very dangerous pattern because it's classic heresy. Heresy is false doctrine. The doctrine, instead of peace on earth, goodwill to all, is war on earth and hatred for everybody else. Well, how did you do that with Christianity? Well, it wasn't easy, but it can be done through careful manipulation. How do you do it? Well, we are saved. We are the saved. People who aren't saved are going to hell. All right. Well, what does that do? Immediately, we become self-righteous, which was one of the most hated things in the life of Jesus. He spoke about self-righteousness. He talked about it. He gave examples of the publican and the sinner in the temple praying. And he said, just don't be like that. No self-righteousness. I don't care who you are. So we make a religion out of self-righteousness. The other is going to hell. So we kill a few people in Iraq. Well, that's good. So that leads to what? Cruelty. Leads to cruelty. And where is this found? It's found in what is called fundamentalism. Yesterday I had lunch with one of the most famous Islamic people who just happened to be here from Palestine, Omar Barghouti. And he identified fundamentalism as the problem. The problem. He said, yeah, we've got kooks in Islam, that's right, sure. But you probably have more in Christianity, and you've got them all over Judaism as well. These people are very dangerous. Why? What is their focus, according to Arnold Toynbee, the historian? He said, the true believer will kill. Why? Because I have the truth. Outside of my truth, there are devils. I will kill the devil in the name of God. Fundamentalism of any kind is the problem. And Barghouti was seeing it, of course. He saw it in the fundamentalists of Israel. He saw it in the fundamentalists he felt were the worst in Christianity. He saw it in Islam. You can have it under any guise. But perhaps the worst guise is under nationalism. And perhaps the worst we ever saw was the Nazi belt buckle. Gott mit uns. God is with us. Isn't that beautiful? Very touching. Thank you, God. So what we try to identify is how religion is misused, and the misuse of it is frequently through doctrine. Doctrine has a history that is political. I gave some examples in the book. One that they're still fighting about. Christianity had come in with crusades in the name of God. And it was getting rather powerful. It was powerful in Constantinople. It was powerful in Rome. And both places wanted to be the center of Christianity. And so they covered their political issue with a doctrine. The Greeks in Constantinople said, the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father only. The Romans said, filioque. The Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. Now, neither side knew what they were talking about. They had no idea. They had nothing to base their argument on. What was it about? It was about where the center is going to be. And since 1054, the two churches have been fighting over this issue. Doctrine leads to arguments. Arguments do not lead to peace. Doctrine leads to nationalism. Nationalism leads to war. So, just a few days ago, Chris Hedges was speaking at Trinity Church, not in, but outside of, in New York City and Wall Street. They had a lot there that they wanted to use for the Occupy movement. And he said, our movement is the closest thing I've ever seen to early Christianity. And he began reciting the Beatitudes. Blessed are you poor in spirit, yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you humble, you shall possess the earth. Blessed are the poor of heart, you shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, you shall be called the children of God. He said, our Occupy movement is primitive Christianity. Now, there are many things in that implication because his background is theological, just as mine is. He believes, as many of us do, and some would call this heresy, that Jesus did not start a religion. He showed us a way to live, a way of life. This is my commandment, that you love one another. It almost sounds like the Unitarian Church. It says love is the doctrine of this church. I think some of you guys are on the right track here. Really think about that. Because that's really what this is my commandment. Singular, love one another. Fascinating. So he felt, as I do and many others sometimes refer to in liberation theology, that Jesus did not start a religion. He told us a way to live. He was proud of his Judaism. He never argued about his background as a Jew. That's what he was. However, we saw times when he told the local parochial groups that they've got to have an internationalist perspective. I would think of one case of Luke chapter 4, where he goes to his own synagogue to preach. And he preaches about Isaiah. He preaches about the liberation of the poor and the liberation of the captives. And the people are just thrilled with what he's saying because he's quoting directly from Isaiah and saying that is being fulfilled today. Then there was a little break in the sermon. And he continued part 2. Part 2 of the sermon, he said that the Spirit of God, he showed the Spirit of God coming to the Syrians and to the non-Jews. And this offended the parochial nature of his little synagogue. They tried to throw him over a cliff. Why? Because they were sectarian and he was not. I think Jesus refused to be a sectarian. So this is opposition to sectarianism. This is opposition to exclusiveness. Who are the saved? Jesus said the prostitutes are getting into heaven. So first we'd have to become a prostitute. Please. He's trying to say the people who fall through the cracks are the ones that I'm interested in. And we mess that up so much that I'm sure if he arrived at one of our churches, he'd probably be thrown out the door. So just one of those unfortunate things. So the matter of religion is critical because it has been used as a cause of war time and time and time again. And that's why we would say, imagine no religion, stolen from John Lennon, of course. He didn't say that, actually. He said, and no religion too. That's the way he put it in his great song, Imagine. But the point being, if it is not creed, and when did it become creed? Well, we saw in the early church, the first 4 centuries, the Romans were so logical. They saw this group come in. They know the group would not serve the Roman Empire, and they gave out a law, non licet esse Christianos. It is not legal to be a Christian. Because the Roman logic in its perfection said to be a servant of the state You have to see the God of the state. The state is God. And if you cannot serve the God of the Roman state, you cannot be a good citizen. And they were right. And people today have determined, I cannot serve empire and serve Jesus. I cannot serve empire and serve Buddha. I cannot serve empire and serve Allah. They get it. People are becoming conscious. Consciousness is what Buddha wanted more than anything. He said, we're walking around with mind chatter all the time. He said, be quiet. And meditate. Think and become conscious. Wake up. Consciousness is what's needed. And for some reason, at this strange moment in history, consciousness is coming. It's really, I never expected to see this. But we are seeing it. And what was the tragedy then of the early Christians? Well, unbelievably, the tragedy was the emperor decided to become a Christian. It was, the myth behind it is that he saw a sign in the sky saying, in hoc signo, means just, in this sign, you will conquer. In hoc signo, means. So he thought about that, and finally said, and this is the creation of what he said, you have conquered, O Galilean. Then, after the beginning of the 4th century, he called the Council of Nicaea as emperor. He paid the way of all the bishops that come to Nicaea. We are going to develop a creed, and we'll call it the Nicene Creed. And this will define the one church in the one empire. Unam sanctam Catholicam, the one. And by the way, the ones that don't conform will kill. Thank you very much. In the name of Jesus. And then he put on the Roman shield the key row, the Greek key and the Greek row, which stood for Christ. And in this sign he would conquer militarily, and thus began muscular Christianity with Constantine. It was a tragedy, because muscular Christianity was followed, of course, by crusades. By 600 years of Inquisition, you are not free to be in error. Because you are a Jew, you are in error. You may be converted, or we can kill you. 600 years of Inquisition. And that was the beginning of trial by jury. They actually gave you a trial. It wasn't accusatory law. It was a trial. And the Inquisition went all the way into this hemisphere. If you go to Mexico City, don't miss the Museum of the Inquisition. Because there, you will visit, and you will see this is where Father Hidalgo, the father of the Mexican Revolution of 1810, was brought before the Inquisition, because the Spaniards were coming in under the name of Our Lady of Remedies, Remedios, in the name of the Blessed Virgin. And of course, the Mexicans were coming in the name of Our Lady of Guadalupe, both representing the Mother of Jesus. So we have the banners of the two in this great revolution taking place. The Spaniards believing that the Indians were there to serve as slaves, and the Spaniards were there to rule. The Mexicans under Father Hidalgo, who was very deeply influenced by Voltaire, said, no, mestizaje. We have to mix the races. This is the cosmic race, la raza cósmica. This is the way it's meant to be. So he was fighting in the name of one mixed race. Well, he was picked up by the Inquisition, and he was given a fair trial. And finally the verdict came down, Father Hidalgo, you are a Lutheran, a Jew, and an atheist. So much for the Inquisition in its infallibility. This is the type of thing that's done in the name of religion. And we see it today with fatwas, and we see people today not taking them seriously, and we see it today with people who understand that rather than repeat a creed, which I can repeat well, and may even look like a pillar of the church, and be a rapist or a murderer, there's something else that can unite us. Jesus said that all be one. Well, you're not going to all be one in culture. We have a variety of cultures. But as we look at the variety of cultures, and as we look at the essence of what the best of their religiosity says, what does it give us? It gives us what are called the fruits of the Spirit. So whether we're talking about Buddhism or Christianity or Islam, the fruits of the Spirit are peace, justice, joy, love, courage, endurance, and compassion. This is the creed. This is the creed. This is the way taught by Jesus and Buddha and Gandhi and Dr. King. Did you ever hear Dr. King ask anybody to become a Baptist? He knew that very well. I mean, in my own experience, looking back, I hadn't thought about it until I wrote the book. I never asked anybody to become a Catholic in my whole life as a priest. I wasn't ever concerned about that. We talked about lifestyle. We talked about living. We talked about the way. But I wasn't anxious to talk about sectarianism. I don't believe in it. I have much more in common with an atheist who would say, yes, I believe in peace, justice, joy, love, endurance, compassion. I have a lot in common with that terrible atheist than I do with someone who might be in my same communion with a warmonger. And the trick of making war into something religious is the great heresy. And we live with it today, where, as you know, on the verge of a war with Iran. And that certainly is what occupied the mind of Omar Barghouti yesterday. He's dedicated as a Palestinian to the nonviolent change. And it was the Jewish community that brought him here to University of California, Irvine, and to various other places. And at noon, we just sat down and had lunch together. And I realized that he wasn't talking about Judaism. He was talking about oppression. There's a difference. There's been oppression in the name of Catholicism. There's been oppression in the name of Protestantism. What happened after Luther? We fought wars for 100 years, for goodness sakes. Endless wars. Protestant Catholic wars. We saw them go on in Ireland practically to the present. What were they? They were a cover for politics. That's all they were. That's all they've ever been. But we can't fall into the trap. Show me the Spirit. Show me the fruits of the Spirit. By their fruits you shall know them. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. These things should be self-evident, as our founders said about various things. They should be self-evident, but they're not. Don't tell me you can be a warmonger and follow the way of Jesus and Buddha. You can't. So why play the game? But the game is played. Politicians love it. What is this group, this strange group of people now running for president? What do they do? They say, well, let's see. I'm reading into it, and maybe I'm being judgmental, so forgive me, God. I think they're saying to themselves, I don't care at all about abortion. I don't care a bit. Nothing. Nada. What I care is, how do I get the votes? And then they look over in here and they say, oh, There's a lot of Catholics that will vote for me if I'm against abortion. So I'm against abortion. Thank you. And now there's a lot of evangelicals that will vote for me if I'm against abortion. So I'm against abortion. And they know they can play the game. And so they're not talking about ending war. They're talking about starting new wars. Can you listen to them? They're talking about an increase in defense spending. We need that, don't we? That is what has caused the economic breakdown of the globe, has been our military spending. That is what did it. You can talk about the phony bankers all you want, etc. You can talk about Wall Street. Wall Street is War Street. They make money on wars. They made money on each war. And they continue to do so. And they're happy to have a war because they're not going to be there to fight it. Now, there's a sad thing going on in all this interplay today. It's really strange. If Bush had come up with a new legislation where you can pick up anybody anywhere, I think there would have been an outrage from, of course, the Democrats. But right now, I think the Democrats are entirely too quiet about the fact that it's okay to put people in prison forever. It's okay to pick up anyone, anywhere, for any reason. It's okay to make drone attacks on innocent people that might be suspect. None of it's okay. All of it is evil. All of it is sinful. All of it has to be stopped. That's what the real situation is. And that's what much of the international Occupy movement is about. We've seen it in various forms. We know that people are sick and tired of war. We know that people have a right to defend themselves. We've seen that in many of the Central American countries where people got tired of being summarily executed and fought back, and that's understandable. The one thing that no one can justify is aggressive war. Aggressive war is the war of Adolf Hitler. Aggressive war is our war in Iraq, Iran, and all around the world, apparently. Aggressive war is evil. There is no justification for it. It's just like torture. You see the fantasy that goes on with these people writing television shows? That whole town would have been obliterated by a nuclear bomb if we hadn't tortured this guy and he told us exactly where the bomb was. Please, parlor games should not be part of contemporary politics. And those are parlor games that have no merit at all. Torture is evil. War is evil. War is a lie. Swanson came out with this wonderful book recently, War is a Lie. It starts with lies, it is continued by lies, and it ends with other lies. The whole thing is a lie. And generally it starts with a contrivance. Oh, somebody's going to stop us in the Straits of Hormuz. Well, that's a great reason. That's just like happened in Vietnam, you know. We had to get out there, stop them, because we created a thing that said we had to stop them. Wars and contrivances go together. And who pays? Primarily the people that are warred upon. Has anybody told you that most of the people who are fighting are children? I think it would be good to think about that. Most of the people in these countries are 14 or 15 years of age on the average. So we're there killing children. You know, it started, my God, I remember Iraq, 1990. Old man Bush was talking about some problems with Kuwait. Our ambassador Gillespie told Saddam, don't worry about it, it's internal. So a bunch of us went over to Baghdad. And we got there and we went down to Babylon. There is a Babylon. It's probably been destroyed by now. Went to Babylon, the people there were asking us to dance with them, and so on. If you arrive somewhere without a weapon in your hand, you'd be surprised how friendly people are. Really, it's just amazing. But if you break into their house in the middle of the night, kick their people around, their children around, terrify them, take the men away, you're making friends? We haven't made any friends. We don't make friends. So, anyway, after driving around that very modern city, Baghdad was probably the most developed city in the Arab world. They did have a dictator, just as Germany did, just as Italy did, just as Spain did. And of course, in our history, we love dictatorships. We've developed dictatorships all through Latin America. That's been our history. And so we went back up to Baghdad from Babylon that evening. We had a small dinner, and there was Yasser Arafat. And he said, you know, I am despondent. Why? Because your country will not talk to me. Your UN ambassador talked to me and he was fired. What was his name? Andy Young. Andy Young talked to Yasser Arafat and was fired. Sure, we don't talk to you, we just bomb you. We just do what we say. We do not practice diplomacy. We do not have any idea what it is. Do what we say or we'll kill you. We can have 10,000 nuclear bombs. If we think you may have one, which you don't, we'll kill you. Thank you very much. I'm sure Jesus would love that. So this is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with what is called a Christian culture, and with some people saying that our nation should be declared Christian because our founders wanted it to be. No, they didn't. And to declare what we're doing as Christian would be the greatest offense against God in the history of the world, I think. So this is the problem we're dealing with today. And in the midst of it, we have consciousness of Occupy. And it has been so exciting to see this, because there's one other thing that you don't find in Occupy. You don't find religious ideologies. By that I mean political ideologies. Most political ideologies are a trap, because they'll tell you this is how the world is going to change. And they're wrong. It doesn't change the way the ideology says it's going to change. It changes the way it changes. So you may have some ideologues in the Occupy movement, but they're not being listened to. Some came along saying, well, let's have diversity in the Occupy movement. Let's allow some to come and if they want to break the windows or they want to damage property, etc., let's let them do that. That's diversity. The General Assembly has been consistent in saying no. We're not saying no with 51%. We're saying no with consensus. We don't want your violence. We've had enough of it. And they're very much influenced by the pedagogy of Paulo Freire, who wrote the book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, as a Brazilian. He said, look, we can't continue to do what we're doing. The rebel forces want to overthrow a group, and then they imitate the group that they overthrew. He said, you can't do that, it doesn't work. So what you do is you identify the oppression, and you deal with the oppression and the oppressors so that they'll get the point ultimately that we're not going to repeat the past. When I say that we have supported dictators, let's look at what we've done. You've seen Egypt recently. The people came together. They overthrew the government of Mubarak, right? All right. Slowly thereafter, we saw the military coming in, taking more and more power. And who's the second recipient of military power? Egypt. Number one is Israel, number two is Egypt. We aid those countries to control them. And we have done this action, I mentioned 100 times, and I mean it. What you saw happen in Egypt has happened all through the Americas. Guatemala has a dictator. The people overthrew it, 1948. 1944. They had 10 years of spiritual socialism. What was spiritual socialism? It was the New Deal of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in Guatemala. With an Eisenhower presidency, it was called communism. So Eisenhower overthrew Guatemala, ended the peaceful revolution, and since 1954, Guatemala has been a de facto police state under the military with elections regularly. They never fail to have elections. And that's what we're trying to do in Egypt today. Oh, we'll have elections. These are called demonstration elections under our supervision. And once the new president comes in the case of Guatemala, the military will get the point across, and you will do what we say or you will die. Yeah, you have your choice. So just do it. And that's how we maintain de facto dictatorships that are de jure constitutional governments. Empire must not have a future. Our dear friend and scholar made it so clear, Chalmers Johnson. He said, you know, you can have a government that is a democracy, or you can have an empire, but you can't have both. And the father of peace studies, Galtung, a Norwegian, wrote a new book recently, and he said, I love the American democracy. I hate the American empire. Now, we're going to have one or the other. They don't work together. You can see that they don't work together by virtue of what's happening domestically. Our prison system is a disgrace to the world. 25% of the prisoners of the world are in this country that has less than 5% of the world's people. And the conditions are miserable, as you found out about the shoe in the state of California and the hunger strikes that went on recently. People being in solitary confinement for 10, 20, 30 years. This is cruelty. And it's a religious cruelty. It's a religiosity of cruelty. It's the cruelty of the Inquisition. You do not believe the way you should, Mr. Galileo. We're going to torture you unless you recant. Because we know what is right. So friends, this is the point we're at now, and we can be very, very excited about this movement, which has appeared now in our own nation. As we walked around from tent to tent at the city hall, some 600 tents, the spirit was really great. It was so fascinating to see the relationship with the homeless, because the homeless came there and they were asked the logical question, would you like something to eat? And they often said yes. Some were offered a tent, which they didn't have. Some were offered medical care at the medical tent. The point is, and this is why Chris Hedges was saying, we are similar to the early Christians, pre-Constantinian Christians, because we have a way of living. And that way of living can become international. All of the problems that we must solve now are international. None of the problems really in this world can be solved by the United States. Absolutely. They're going to solve anything to do with the environment. They can't. Can the United States save the ocean? No, it can't. It has no power at all to save the ocean. You will save the ocean through international action. Now, people recognize this at the time of World War I. Prior to World War I, the worry about world war came up at The Hague, and they denounced any war. After World War I, we saw the League of Nations developed, saying all problems have to be solved internationally. We can't solve them as the toughest cop on the beat. It's impossible. In 1920, the Senate of the United States destroyed the League, and that was the end. If there had been a functional League of Nations, there would have been no World War II. After that most horrendous disaster, the UN was formed. The UN was designed to end the scourge of war. The UN's major enemy over the years has been the United States. We go along with whatever they come up with if it suits us. If it doesn't suit us in any way, we'll fight it. We have still the veto power, which is the power of the victors in World War II. That veto power has to be abolished, and we have to get a legislative branch together that can make decisions. So we have the structure for international law and order, but apparently our people are going to continue to fight it, to do everything they can to sabotage it, but we must keep working on behalf of that. It came in as a treaty in our Constitution, and as you know, once a treaty is signed, it becomes the law of the land. It becomes incarnate in the Constitution. So the Charter of the UN is incarnate in the Constitution of the United States, and we have been the greatest violator of international law now in the history of the world. So we have great work to do. It can be done by non-cooperation. Mr. Barghouti, this is amazing. Here he was on his way. He's on his way back to Palestine, where he will arrive on Sunday, but he has to go through customs in Israel, and Israel knows that he happens to have written this book, The Global Struggle for Palestinian Rights, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. And the Jewish community was with him yesterday to support him, say this is just what we need. We can't be an outrage to the international community. We cannot savage the Palestinian people. We need this, and we need it now. And they were the people who invited him here, in case you didn't know that. He was invited here by the Jewish community. Why? Because they love his attachment to nonviolence. He has his problems with Palestinians, of course he does. He has to deal with fanatics. He knows that. He has to deal with fanatics in Israel. He knows that. But it's the same situation that Jesus was in. And that's why in his continued sermon for Occupy, Chris Hedges went on to say, were you there when they crucified the Lord? And he went through all of the people who have given their lives for justice, one after another. You know, were you there when they crucified Dr. King? Were you there when they crucified Rachel Corrie? He has a magnificent understanding of applied Christianity. His background, I guess, was the Harvard School of Divinity. 20 years after that with the New York Times. And I had asked him to come on Sunday morning with me. I don't think he can do it. He's finishing a book. And I'm sure his book will be really wonderful, as his previous books have been. But why does Omar support this? He said because it's nonviolent. The boycott is nonviolent. Divestment helped us to bring the change to South Africa, and it worked. Sanctions work. And this is what we need at this time, because we don't want Mickey Mouse tools. We want strong tools of nonviolence. And we have to use those strong tools, and that's why Occupy is going to the homeowners and supporting their staying in their homes, saying to them, force your bank to prove they own this property. They can't prove it. They cannot prove they own your home. Force them to give it back to you. The point is, people all over the world are tired of phony governance. People in the United States are saying, well, who does my 9% approved House of Representatives represent? They represent the banks, the insurance companies, and the military-industrial complex. Do they represent me? No. No, they don't. And so we can't tolerate that. That's just not okay. So we're going to object to it in every way possible and continue to do that. This is the greatest international movement that I know of historically, because it is non-sectarian, it is not religious, but it is a moral revolution, a moral and ethical revolution. And morals and ethics are things that people can agree on. That's why they came up in 1948 with the International Declaration of Human Rights. So that one country can say, well, our human rights aren't your human rights. The whole world came out against torture. The whole world came out for the right to medical care. The whole world came out for the right to education. We have no such rights in our Constitution. It's very old, it's very outdated, it needs a lot of work, we have to get on with it. And that's what I intend to do. So, internationalism is the way. Look at ourselves as related to the rest of the world, the rest of the people. We live on a tiny little planet that's in grave danger of extinction. To think that it all depends on one nation to start wars everywhere to change things is just absolutely not what's happening, or not what's going to happen, or not what has happened in the past. Look at the tragedies we've lived with. The tragedy of Indochina, 3 million people massacred, most of them non-combatants. Look at Central America and the Latin America in general, probably a minimum of 1 million people massacred in recent wars in that area. Iraq, millions of people. Afghanistan, and on and on. And now we're playing with the nukes. And this is really the arrival of the cult. When we get our people, if they approve of that, then we are in the Jim Jones cult, and we will all take the same Kool-Aid, and we'll all kill ourselves. That's what I think of when I hear Mr. Netanyahu speak, and when I hear Obama speak. Wait a minute, friends, you guys you're interested in suicide, and we're not. We're interested in life and biophilia, the love of life. So this is a great, great moment. If Occupy doesn't show much interest in electoral politics, please don't be surprised. They will when the time comes, but don't expect us of Occupy to defend Mr. Obama as though he's going to be a great candidate. Don't expect us to do that. On Tuesday morning of the election, I'll decide who I vote for. I'm not going to work for a candidate like that. I don't work for candidates like that. I work for people that want to end war and that want to have distributive justice. There is no excuse for the rotten distribution of justice in the city of Los Angeles or Anaheim or anywhere else in the United States. Here we have people working 3 and 4 jobs, trying to pay their rent, and others picking up $200 or $300 million a year. That is immoral. That is not in accord with the ethics and morals of the centuries. The entire ethical community for the past 3,000 years would oppose that. And that's what we have, a rotten distribution and a great influence of Calvin, whose followers, maybe not he himself, but some of his followers believed that wealth was a sign of God's blessing, and that poverty was a sign of predestination to hell. That's a wonderful thing to believe when you live in a capitalist country. It really makes things very well. The homeless are there because they should be, and the sick are there without medical care because they should be. All of this is as it should be. Everything is the way the people said to Voltaire. Everything is as it should be. And he said, are you kidding? He certainly didn't believe that. So we don't believe it either, and we don't believe it in the name of religion that the poor are there because they are evil, because there are a lot of poor children. And you know, everyone needs an income. A 3-year-old needs an income. If his daddy or mommy is sick or absent, he or she needs an income. Whoever said they could get along without an income? They also need a right to health care. So these are things we're going to work on and continue to work on. The Occupy movement is doing it. Government is not doing it. And when they start doing it, we'll join them. Maybe you have some questions tonight. I don't know.